Sairam students, today we are going to do the revision of history chapter number 1, what, where, how and when. This revision is going to help you for preparing for your exams. So let us begin with the revision. In this chapter we are going to revise these topics. Finding out what happened. What can we know about the past? Where did people live? Names of the land. Finding out about the past, that is through the sources of history. And in our next revision class, we will learn about one, past or many, what do dates mean, and elsewhere, that is about Egypt. Children, do you know what is history? History is the study of our past, and the knowledge that is gained from the study of history is important to understand both the past and the present. Children, if you remember Rashida's question, when she had seen a headline, what came to her mind? She wanted to know how will people come to know what had happened so many years ago. So, finding out what happened. Now, if you want to know what happened yesterday, you could find it in different ways. You could listen to the radio, watch television or read a newspaper and find out what happened yesterday. But if you want to know about last year, you can ask somebody who remembers about it. And if you want to know what happened long years ago, then what can be done? Yes, we can read the books which were based upon the findings by the historians and archaeologists through the past remains that are found, such as manuscripts, inscriptions, tools, weapons, etc. Let us find out what can be done to know about the past, that is about many years ago. Now let us see what can we know about the past. We can know what the people used to eat, the kinds of clothes that they used to wear, the houses in which they lived, and the lives of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, craftspersons, artists, musicians and scientists. And we also can come to know about the games children played, the stories they heard, the plays they saw and the songs they sang. So all these things we can know about how they were in the past. Now let us see where did the earliest people live. The earliest people, they were hunter-gatherers and they never used to live in one place. They used to move from one place to another. That means they did not have any fixed settlements and they used to wander mainly along the banks of river Narmada. And this had started around several 100,000 years ago. So the earliest people, they were the skilled gatherers and they knew about the vast wealth of plants. They used to collect roots, fruits and other forest produce for their food. And they also hunted animals. Children, this is the picture of the earliest people. The earliest people, they used to live on the Suleiman and Kirtar hills. Where are the Suleiman and Kirtar hills located? The Suleiman and Kirtar hills, they are located in the modern day Pakistan, that is towards the northwest. And some men and women, they began to grow crops. The first crops that they grew were wheat and barley around 8,000 years ago, and they used to rear the cattle and sheep and goats. They used to live in villages. And we also can locate the Garo hills, and the Garo hills, they are in the northeast. And where are Vindhyas? Vindhyas are in the central India. There were some of the other areas where agriculture developed and rice was first grown in the north of Vindhyas. What was grown in the north of Vindhyas? Rice was first grown in the north of Vindhyas. And if you trace the river Indus and its tributaries, what do you mean by tributaries, children? Tributaries are smaller rivers that flow into a larger river. So, about 4700 years ago, some of the earliest cities, they flourished on the banks of these rivers. Later, about 2500 years ago, these cities developed on the banks of the Ganga and its tributaries, and also along the sea coasts. And what is the tributary of River Ganga? Son. Son is the tributary of River Ganga. And in ancient times, the area along these rivers, that is to the south of the Ganga, it was known as Magadha, that is now lying in the state of Bihar. So where was Magadha located? Magadha was located to the south of the Ganga, and its rulers, they were very powerful, and they set up a large kingdom, and these kingdoms, they were set up in other parts of the country as well. So why was Magadha famous? Magadha was famous because its rulers were very powerful, who established large kingdoms. Children, this is a map of South Asia. South Asia is often called a subcontinent. Why? Because although it is smaller than a continent, it is very large and is separated from the rest of Asia by seas, hills and mountains. Children, here you can locate the Suleiman and Kirtar hills. You can also locate the Garo hills that are to the northeast, and Vindhyas in the central India. You can also locate River Indus and its tributaries, and River Ganga and its tributary Son. Now let us revise how traveling was an important part of the life of the people in the past. We know that people, they traveled from one part of the subcontinent to another. That means they were very fond of traveling, and they used to cross the hills and the high mountains, including the Himalayas, and deserts, rivers and seas. These all made their journeys dangerous but not impossible. And some men and women, they also used to move from one place to another for livelihood, and also to escape from natural disasters like floods or droughts. And sometimes men, they marched in armies to conquer others' lands. The merchants, they traveled with caravans or ships, and they used to carry valuable goods from place to place. And there were religious teachers who used to walk from village to village and town to town, and they used to offer instructions and advice to the people who met them on the way. And there were also people who traveled because they were adventurous by nature, and they enjoyed discovering new and exciting places. And all these things, they led to sharing of ideas between the people. Children, here you can see some reasons why people traveled from one part of the subcontinent to another. Children, we know that people, they travel from one place to another nowadays also. So why do people travel nowadays? We know that the hills, the mountains and the seas, they form the natural frontiers of the subcontinent, and it was difficult to cross these frontiers. Those who wanted, they could, and they did scale the mountains and cross the seas. So people from across the frontiers, they also came into the subcontinent and settled here. So, what was the effect of traveling? These movements of people, it enriched our cultural traditions, and people, they started sharing new ways of carving stone, composing music, and even cooking food over several hundreds of years. So all these things, they led to sharing of new ideas. Children, now let us revise the names of the land, that is about India. We know that two of the words are used for our country, India and Bharat. From where does the word India come? The word India came from the Indus, called Sindhu in Sanskrit, and the different groups, they named India differently. The Iranians and Greeks, they came through northwest about 2500 years ago, and they called it as Hindus or Indos. And the land to the east of river Indus was called as India. And the name Bharata was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest, that is mentioned in the Rig Veda. And we know that Rig Veda, it is the earliest composition in Sanskrit, which was composed about 3500 years ago, and later this name was used for the country. Children, now let us find out about the past. That means, how can we know about the past? We can know it with different sources such as manuscripts, inscriptions, and the archaeological excavations or the evidences. Children, let us revise about manuscripts. What do you mean by manuscripts? Manuscripts means the books that were written by hand long ago. And the word manu means hand in Latin. And it was written on the palm leaf or on the birch. What is birch? Birch is specially prepared bark of the tree that was grown in the Himalayas. Children, do you know, over the years, these manuscripts, they were eaten away by the insects. Some were destroyed, but many have survived. They are often preserved in the temples and in the monasteries. And these books, they all deal with all kinds of subjects, such as religious beliefs and practices, the lives of kings, medicine, and science. And there are also epics, poems, plays, which were written in Sanskrit, Prakrit, and Tamil. Do you know, children, the people, they used to speak in Prakrit. That is, the ordinary people, they used the Prakrit language. Now, let us revise about inscriptions. What are inscriptions? Inscriptions are the writings on relatively hard surfaces such as stone or metal. So, which are the hard surfaces on which the inscriptions are inscribed? Yes, on the stone or the metal. And sometimes the kings, they got their orders inscribed. Why did they do so? So that people could see, read, and obey them. And the other kinds of inscriptions where the men and the women, including the kings and queens, they recorded what they did. For example, kings often kept records of their victories in the battle. Here, children, you can see an example of an old inscription dated about 2250 years ago, and it was found in Kandahar, that is in present day Afghanistan. This was inscribed on the orders of Emperor Ashoka. Children, you know that when we write anything, we use a script. So, the script it consists of letters or signs. And when we read what is written or speak, we use a language. And if you see this inscription, it was inscribed in 2 different scripts and languages. That is Greek at the top and Aramaic below. So these different scripts and languages, they were used in this area. Now children, let us revise about the archaeological excavations or evidences. You know that there were many things that were made and were used in the past. And those who study these objects, they are called as archaeologists. What do archaeologists do? They study the remains of the buildings made of stone or brick, paintings and sculpture. And they also explore and excavate, that is, dig under the surface of the earth. Then, what did the archaeologists find during their excavations? They found the tools, weapons, pots, pans, ornaments and coins. And some of these objects may be made up of stone, bone, baked clay or metal. And these objects, they were made of hard, imperishable substances. So they could survive for a long time. And plant remains survive far more rarely. And it is possible if the seeds of the grain or the pieces of the wood, they have been burnt. So they have survived in a charred form. Children, you know that the historians, that is the scholars who study the past, they use the word source to refer to the information that is found from the manuscripts, inscriptions and by the archaeologists. So, once these sources are found, learning about the past, it becomes an adventure. You would like to know more about it, isn't it? As we reconstruct it bit by bit. So, historians and archaeologists, they are like detectives who use all these sources like clues to discover about the past. Children, we have done the revision of the first part of this chapter. We shall continue with the revision of this chapter in our next class. I hope you have understood the topics that we have revised today. Children, go through the lesson, read it thoroughly for your better understanding. Till then, goodbye and keep learning.